Hello everyone, this is Nisha. Today I'm going to present the topic Roman classes. Already we have completed the Greek critics, Plato and Aristotle. Now we move on to the Roman classes, among which the first will be Horace. We are not sure whether this is the authentic photograph or art of Horace. This is what I could get from the internet. So, actually, Horace lived in the glorious Augustan era, which was the period of Roman civilization and culture. Poetry flourished in his age and was considered something good and noble and not pernicious and unhealthy. Horace wrote both creative and critical pieces. He was the greatest exponent of classicism. He also composed satires, epodes, odes, epistles, and his Ars Poetica is in verse. It is a poetic letter written to his friend Piso and his two sons as a piece of advice on poetic composition. Horace called it Epistle to the Pisos, but it was Quintilian who named it Ars Poetica. It was translated into English by Ben Jonson. So this is the factual information or the first-hand information of Horace, that we understand that he lived during the glorious Augustan era of the Roman civilization and culture. During this period, unlike the period of Plato and Aristotle, poetry was considered to be something good and noble and not hazardous or pernicious, means hazardous, dangerous or unhealthy. So Horace wrote both creative, imaginative work as well as critical writings. And he also was the greatest exponent of classicism. That is why when we take up Roman classes, we take first the first Horace. So he also composed some other genres of satire, epodes, odes, epistles, everything. And his most important work is Ars Poetica, which is in verse. So it's a poetic letter written to his friend called Piso, but and also as a piece of advice on poetic composition to his two sons. Actually, Horace named it the Epistles to the Piso, but it was Quintilian who named it Ars Poetica. Quintilian was one among the contemporary writers when Horace lived. Okay, so it was translated into Roman English by Ben Jonson. So, because of the admirable conciseness of his critical observations and extremely quotable quality of his lines, Horace was exalted to the position of a lawgiver by Dante. Dante, in this unit, we have the um, part which is dedicated to Dante also. You will be learning Dante also. Dante, so we find that Dante has given a very important observation about Horace, that he says that his lines are extremely quotable and he has emphasized him to be a lawgiver. So Horace was both a critic and a creative writer and was very well read. So he was very much very well educated, and he was critic as well as both a creative writer. He wrote only one important critical document in verse, and that is Ars Poetica. So this critical document, Ars Poetica, was another poetics in Latin and brought the same reputation as to Aristotle in Greek. Though he popularized the principles of Aristotle, yet he threw fresh lights. So we from the work Ars Poetica, we understand that it is another poetics. Poetics is considered to be one of the most important critical text in literary criticism, and that was written by Aristotle in Greek. And in Latin language, Ars Poetica is considered to be one of the famous written by Horace. So actually, though he gives some, he was influenced by the principles of Aristotle. Horace was able to give some fresh lights, or he was able to give some fresh ideas in his work. He was original in effecting a compromise between the conflict claims of pleasure and profit as the end of creative writing. He stated that the aim of poetry is to instruct or to delight or both. He was also original in his insistence on proportion and order. He stated that great literature is the price of ceaseless toil. His aesthetics and emphasis on good tastes are unique contributions. He identified unity with the good taste and made men conscious of what good taste really is. So, a sound philosophy of art is nothing but a rational account of good taste. So we get to know a lot of information from this slide. We understand that Ars Poetica is somewhat equivalent to Poetics, which was written by Aristotle in Greek, and Ars Poetica was written in Latin. And he makes understanding as unlike Plato and Aristotle, he has something else. Horace has something else to tell us. He says that the end of poetry should be, or the aim of poetry is to instruct or to delight or both. So according to Plato, actually it was to instruct. According to Aristotle, it was to delight. But according to Horace, it is he says it is both. So a poetry should be instructive as well as it should be something very delightful also. So it should be pleasing, it should be expressive to the reader. So his original proposition in his insistence on proposition on order, he stated that great literature is the price of ceaseless toil. So hard work always pays. That is what I always say. Ceaseless means non-stoppable. So, someone who is producing literature, actually, that is a work of very hard and steadfast work they have put, all the efforts they have taken. So ceaseless toil. Toil means very hard work. Okay. So his aesthetics and emphasis on good taste are unique contribution. So he identified unity with good taste and made men conscious of what good taste really is. So though it may sound as philosophical, it should have, though if a poetry, though it should be philosophical, it should also have a good taste. That is according to Horace. So, by transforming Aristotle's doctrines into critical rules, he philosophically enlightened good taste without troubling his readers to philosophize about it. His immense influence in the history of criticism is indeed precisely due to the fact that he made his theory appeal to good taste. So, you find that transforming as I told you, Horace was influenced by Aristotle, and he has taken the critical doctrines or rules of Aristotle, which philosophically enlightened good taste without troubling the readers. So that is the idea. So there was a diversion, though he took the influence of Aristotle. He According to Horace, a poetry should have some kind of a good taste and it should not trouble the readers. Reader, if he want or he or she want to get some philosophical ideas from the poem, let them get. Or otherwise, they are just reading for pleasure, let them read for pleasure. So it should not be a compulsion for them. Just don't give advice to these people. That's what his idea is. So his immense influence in the history of criticism is indeed precisely due to the fact that he made his theory appeal to good taste. So according to Horace, we find good taste. So Ars Poetica exercised a tremendous influence during the Middle Ages and the Neoclassical age. It was the Bible of classicism in England. The main ideas contained in Ars Poetica are summarized below. So actually, Ars Poetica had a great influence during the Middle Ages and Neoclassical age, which during the period which is considered in England. Actually, many of the writers were influenced by by this work, Ars Poetica. So, what are the three main ideas given by this Ars Poetica? So it tells you about the nature and function of poetry. It is not a systematic treatise on criticism, but a poem can be divided into three parts. So, according to Ars Poetica or Horace, we can find that a poem can be divided into three parts. One is poiesis, the subject matter. Next is poema, that is form. Next is poeta, the poet. Its main topics of discussion are poetry, poetic style, and drama. So, this is what the content of Ars Poetica. Ars Poetica gives you idea about all these things. So he nowhere calls poetry a process of imitation like to Plato and Aristotle. Mere imitation, according to him, is not enough. Often a poet uses fiction and mingles facts with fancy. To him, the function of poetry was both to delight and instruct. Poets desire either to improve or to please or to unite the agreeable and the profitable. But it is not enough for poems to have beauty, they must also be pleasing and leave the listener's soul with what they will. So you find that he nowhere calls poetry the process of imitation like to uh, Plato and Aristotle. So you find that mere imitation, according to him, is not enough. Often a poet uses fiction and mingles facts with fancy. Okay, so to him, the function of poetry was both to delight and instruct, that we have already seen. So poet's desire either is to improve or please or to unite the agreeable and the profitable. And it is not enough for the poems to have beauty, they must also have some pleasing effect on the listener's soul. What is the subject matter of poetry? The subject matter of a poetry should be very simple according to Horace, and it should be familiar material and uniform that is full of wholeness. So there should be a holistic approach in the subject matter of the poetry. According to Horace, subject matter of the poetry should be simple, familiar, and it should have some wholesome development. He says that he who chooses his subject wisely will find that neither words nor lucid arrangements will fail him, for sound judgment is the basis of and source of good writing. So he says everyone, the person who is going to write something should choose his subject, that in the sense subject matter wisely, and he should never fall in short of words or lucid arrangement or judgment what he is trying to say. There should not be a confusion in the subject matter. That is what Horace is trying to say. Next important thing he concentrates is poetic diction. The poetic diction is the language of poetry, and actually poetry, the language of poetry should be expressive in nature. It should express the feeling of the poet, and also whoever reads it should get some expression of by continually changing since it is continually adding to it. So man's experience differs, right? As I told you, every individual is different. So according to their individual taste, it changes. So language is also like that. Language is like a tree and its words are like leaves. As the years go on, the old leaves fall and new leaves take their place. But the tree remains the same. Like Aristotle, Horace also emphasizes the right choice of words and their effective arrangement in composition. Poet is free to use both familiar and new words. New words continually evolve in the poet like new leaves. The poet must not rely on the vocabulary of his predecessors. He must coin new words too. So according to Horace, language is like a tree in which old leaves will fall and after some time new leaves will come there, take their place. And according to Horace also, like Aristotle, he says that a writer must coin new words. He should not merely copy whatever his predecessors, the previous writers or previous ancestors have written. He should also the new writers should always try to give some new words to the language. So language is ever changing. It is dynamic in nature. That is the idea of Horace. His observations on style, Horace wished that the writer should observe the settled forms and shades of style in poetry. According to Horace, appropriate meter should be used and there should be sincerity of emotions. It is not enough for poems to have beauty, they must also be pleasing. So when it comes to style, he says that a poetry should have appropriate meter. Meter in the sense the length of the poetry. So if only in Tirukural we find that there are 4 words in the first line and 3 words in the second line, but still it has some proprietary. All the Tirukurals are like that, right? But that is what he's trying to say. So first line should consist of this when there is only 5 to 6 words, second line should also be like that. Otherwise, a definite kind of meter should be followed. That's what he means by style over here. Next, in Haas Poetica, he also discussed some views on drama. He does not give any systematic theory actually as presented in drama on a larger basis. It's only fragmentary or casual ideas he has given. So, but Horace studies drama in 3 heads. One is plot, characterization, and style. Whatever it is, a drama should have a plot, that is the storyline, characterization, and there should be a style. Plot should be borrowed from the familiar material, like the subject matter of poetry. The plot or the subject matter of the drama should also be from the familiar material. So the chorus should be an integral part of the plot. Chorus should also be there. They are the supportive characters, right? The character should behave consistently and naturally. Dramatic speech should observe propriety. So on the whole, if we judge by effect, the most important name in the history of criticism next to Aristotle is Horace. Criticism, which can give a rational account of itself, was first made possible by Aristotle, but it is Ars Poetica which broadcasts the seed of Poetica over every literature in Europe. So we come to understand that it was Ars Poetica that gave some idea regarding the broadcast of the literature, or seed of poetry was sown with this. Okay. So next, after Horace, we move on to Longinus. So Longinus is actually, the name is Cassius Longinus. He was a rhetorician and philosophical critic. He was perhaps a native of Emesa in Syria. He studied at Alexandria and taught for 30 years in Athens, one of his pupils being Porphyry. Longinus is the name associated with the Latin treatise commonly known as On the Sublime, one of the most influential and perceptive works of literary criticism ever written. But there has been considerable dispute as to the author of the On the Sublime. So Cassius Longinus, for every author, actually we are looking at one important work. So starting from Plato till Longinus, we have seen some important works, right? So when you think of Longinus, your mind should always remember On the Sublime. If you think of Horace, it is Ars Poetica. So that is how it goes on. Aristotle's Poetics and Plato's Republic, everything. So here, but there is a dispute. There is a contrary idea that whether the writer of On the Sublime is Cassius Longinus, but still we have now, as of now, there is no such kind of an explanation. So we consider that it is written by Longinus. So what is sublime? Sublime means elevation or loftiness or a certain distinction and excellence in composition. So according to Longinus, both nature and art contribute to the sublimity in literature. So Longinus find 5 principal sources of the sublime. The first 2, which are largely the gifts of nature, the remaining 3 of art. So sublime means elevated level, somewhat a higher level. So you should the thinking of a great personalities think great thinking. They always have a great thinking, right? Other than being common people, you just think of the great people in this world. They always think high. That is what you mean by sublime. That is the meaning of the thought sublime. So according to Longinus, there are 5 principal sources from where you get this thinking. First 2 are actually the gift of nature. It is innate or it is inborn, and other 3 are that we get from education or get from experience, etc. So first 2 are the grandeur of thought and capacity of strong emotions. So the thinking capacity, or if you're a human being, definitely we all have a thinking process, right? The grandeur of thought, and that thought may differ according to individual, but still some people think very high, some people think very low. That doesn't matter here. So there's a difference in opinion, difference in thought. So likewise, capacity of strong emotion. Some people are very strong that they never let off their emotions outside. There are some people who they immediately let off their emotions. So it's a capacity of strong. These two are controlled, the inborn, and this is actually a characteristic through which we actually give a character to a personality. Next are the appropriate use of figures, nobility of diction, dignity of composition, or a happy synthesis of all the preceding elements. So another things come from the experience or education or the idea in which you are going to write it. So appropriate use of figures in the sense figure of speech, the language, then the diction, dignity of composition, all should have that is actually acquired. So when it say that something is inborn, something other three, first two are inborn, other three are acquired from the outside. So, what is grandeur of thought? Nobody can produce a sublime work unless his thoughts are sublime. Sublimity must echo the great soul. Lofty thoughts and ideas are precondition of for sublimity. Trivial thoughts mean and servile ideas do not lead to sublimity. Longinus did not have mere imitation or borrowing in mind, but that men catch fire from the spirit of the others. So grandeur of thought, actually we every human being have some level of thinking. Maybe for some people think that that is trivial, that is not at all a thought, but for some people the actually the thought or the imitation or borrowing in mind, yeah, actually we get inspired by others. So that is what the term men catch fire from the spirit of others. The grandeur of conception is to be emphasized and made effective by a suitable treatment of material. Details should be chosen as to form an organic whole. Amplification or accumulation of all details of a given subject is also helpful. It suggests overwhelming strength and magnitude. The use of vivid and compelling images is also useful, for it brings home to the readers the conception of the writer effectively and forcefully. So, grandeur of conception, the idea which the writer or the poet has acquired should be very effective, and you should amplify it, and the accumulation of the details of that particular subject should be overwhelming in strength and magnitude. So even if it is a small aspect, we should give a very big picture of it. So it should that should create an impact on the reader. That is what you mean by grandeur of thought. Next is capacity for emotion. This is the second source of sublime, which is vehement and inspired passion. Longinus asserts that nothing contributes more to the loftiness of tone in writing than genuine emotion, but the emotions have to be true emotions and in the right place. Next is the capacity of as a second source, principal source of sublime. We find that it is the true emotions, and it should be that emotion should be used in right place. Next is appropriate use of pictures. The third source of attaining excellence of style is the use of figures of speech, which he considered very important. Sublimity can be attained by the appropriate use of the figures of speech. So, so where metaphor should be used, where alliteration should be used, where simile should be used, everything. So, like this, these are called figures of speech, right? We have quite a lot of figures of speech in English. So, appropriate use of these figures of speech give added advantage to the writing. So it should be it should not be mechanically used. It should be actually rooted in genuine emotion, and it should be used in the right place in the right manner. So this is one of the chief figures of that make for sublimity. These are the three figures of speech which we comes under. It's a higher term. So ascendanton, hyperdebaton, and periphrasis. So all these three things should. So all the figures of speech which we consider to be metaphor, simile, all come under these titles. Next is nobility of diction. Next is the fourth source of sublime is diction, that is choice of words, arrangement of words or metaphors or an ornamental language which produce a moving and seductive effect. Use of grand words for a trivial object will only be ridiculous. So according to the subject matter in which you are using, the language should be chosen. So if you are using a strong language for a very trivial or comical matter, it will actually be ridiculous. It will not give you proper effect. So choice of words for writing anything is very important. Next is dignity of composition. The fifth source of sublime is the dignity of composition. That is a dignified composition or arrangement of words. Hence, sublimity should be one that blends thought, emotion, figures, and words themselves. The preceding four elements of sublimity into a harmonious whole. Elements of grandeur cannot be separated from each other. So there should be a dignity of composition, the arrangement of words, everything adds to the last part. So the grandeur of thought should be there, the control of emotion, nobility of diction, all these comes. Then finally, this will give some kind of importance, that is dignity for the composition. So it should be a harmonious whole. But there are true as well as false sublime. There is a differentiate between two things, true versus false. False sublime is characterized by timidity or bombast language and also by a parade of pomp language. So what is called false sublime? False sublime is something in which the language is very high, but there is no idea or no influence which can be made from that particular writing. But true sublimity, on the other hand, is marked by universality of appeal. It pleases all and always uplifts our soul. So this is the difference between false and true sublime. So uses of metaphor and metaphorical description. So again, the figurative language, how it should be used. The figurative language is the powerful and forceful source of sublime. Metaphors should be used in impassioned and descriptive passages. When passion is heavy and fast flowing, metaphors should be used appropriately. Besides producing sublimity, metaphors help in the attainment of precision. So when it comes to the use of figures of speech, he talks about the metaphor. Metaphor should be used in a high level. Different kinds of metaphors can be used. So metaphors satisfy the needs of pleasant surprise. They should not be an ornament but an essential part of the work of literature. So it should not just serve as an ornament, but it should have some essential thing. Essential, it should be the essential part of literature. The use of metaphor should be natural, nor mechanical, nor artificial. And the excessive use of metaphysics is also condemnable. Much of Longinus' ideas on metaphor are borrowed from Aristotle, Theophrastus, and Quintilian, but Longinus, unlike others, does not limit the use of metaphors to a specific number. Though he has borrowed from others, he has made it its own. So Longinus as a critic, Longinus is a classicist in taste, a romanticist in temper, and an idealist at heart. So we can have, as a critic, we can have consider him in 3 points of view. One is classicist. He is a classicist in taste, and he is romantic in temper. Romantic means who gives importance to the ideas of nature, importance of nature, beauty, etc. And idealist at heart. But still, there should be some, as we all have seen, the function of poetry should, the aim of poetry should instruct, delight, etc. That is the part which we call the idealist. His practical criticism is illuminating, interesting, and original. He had a comprehensive vision and a wider outlook. He used both the comparative and historical methods in practical criticism. Abercrombie calls him the first comparative critic of literature. He had a rare breadth and catholicity of outlook and a mind free from prejudices. He had just and permanent estimates on psychological principles. So he was first comparative critic of literature. His mind was free from prejudices. He does not have a kind of prejudice against for something, but also he included psychological principles in his writing. So Longinus had a great respect for Greeks from tradition and information. He also advocates decorum, propriety, balance, correctness, earnestness, order, fitness, etc. In all, this is a classic. At the same time, he anticipated much that is modern. His conception of inspiration and ecstasy is modern. His views on literature as a transport is a unique contribution. His deep influence on both the neoclassics and romantics he is irrelevant to the modern age. So Pope's eulogy to Longinus is notable. Bold Longinus, an ardent judge, the fountain of great sublime. So from the praise which was given by Pope to Longinus, we can see that he is called bold Longinus, and he is an ardent judge of the people, and he is a fountain of great thinking. Great sublime means great thinking. So, in fact, the fusion of the romantic, the classical, and the modern strains in Longinus is the real key to his greatness, originality, and relevance. He has an appeal to the romanticists as well as the classicists, and also to some extent the moderns. He was the first to assert that style is man. He is indeed the most modern of the ancient critics. So, as a fusion of romanticism, classicism, and modern strain, he is great. He has a great appeal as a romantic as well as classicist, and also he was first to assert the style is man and the most modern of the ancient critics. So next we can move on to Dante. Here you can find the Dante very colorful. Actually, he was very, what we can say, very pleasure loving as well as yeah, romantic by heart, etc. So even his work, though it is so very much philosophical, we find that Dante's ideas on writing literary criticism is very pleasing as well as delightful. So that is Dante. Dante, the famous Italian critic and poet, was reputed public figure of his time. He is more popular as a poet than as a critic. His main critical work is the fragmentary work named Of the Vulgar Tongue. He made a fervent advocacy of the vernacular, that is Italian, against the use of classical Latin and French. His work on criticism is the most important critical document between Longinus and the 17th century. So his critical works, actually, he was the one who started writing in Italian, and he advocated that also his mother tongue. He wanted to write in mother tongue because when you get educated, you start writing in other languages. Though, for example, when we say that we are most of us in Tamil Nadu write in English, right? So rather than writing in our mother tongue, many people choose to write in a foreign language. So but Dante was unlike other like that those people who wanted to write in other languages. He advocated the right to write in vernacular, that is his own mother tongue. Next, the language of poetry, according to Dante, is he worked as a crusader for the cause of mother tongue and rejected Latin and Greek as assiduous, involving wastage of time. Because during his time, people who are very well educated were expected to write in Latin or Greek, but he was very much against that point, and he said that he wrote in the vernacular language of poetry to magnify the object. He wanted to approach the common by writing his Divine Commedia in the Florentine medium and not in classical Latin. So he want first, according to Dante, he should first appeal to the local public. Then if it is so prosperous, then he can reach to others. So according to him, first I should appeal to my people. That is the basic idea. So he decided to write his Divine Commedia in his own mother tongue, that is Italian. His theory of poetic diction, Dante was the first critic who supported the claims of the vernacular against the classical Latin and the French province, but he did not favor slipshod native language. He pleaded that the language of poetry should be an ideal language fit to express the best thoughts of the greatest poet. It should be proper, elevated, and illustrated, and it should be the language of culture. So whatever the previous writers have given us, the same idea you find here also. The language of poetry should be an ideal language. It should express the best thoughts of the greatest poet. It should be proper. It should be elevated. It should be illustrative in nature. It should produce some kind of influence. The language of poetry should influence the culture as well as the expression of the people. So according to Dante, grand style follows the grand theme. So style depends on the excellence of vocabulary. So for Dante, each individual word is spoken of almost as if it had a separate personality of its own. Certainly a distinctive character which it may possess independently of its context. He sets about his task of collecting words as if they were choosing a company of trusty comrade, and there is not one of them which must not play its part worthily in the texture of the poem. So grand style should be followed and there should be a grand theme, and the style actually depend on the excellence of vocabulary and the separate personality. We should not, each individual have their own idea of the language, so it should appeal to everyone. And that is, he says that the task of collecting words is like choosing a best friend. So that is what he is trying to say. So that give you the idea of the texture of the poem. So the style and the theme depends on the choice of words. So he requires that the vocabulary of his illustrious vernacular should be composed of grand words only, words that lend themselves to grand manner. He rejects words which are childish, effeminate, rough, slippery, and rumbled. Words should be also be chosen with their view on their sounds. Ornamental words may be used for a beautiful harmonious conjunction. So according to him, grand words should not be childish, slippery, etc. And it should, even if it is ornamental, it should have some harmonious conjunction of ideas. As a critic, you find that Dante holds a high place for his advocacy of the vernacular for literary purposes. He was the first to make the division of the power of language into signum rationale and signum sensuale, which is exactly a distinction of semantic and phonetic. He insisted upon the need of noble poetic diction. His contribution was also in the field of comparative criticism. No ancient critic could have made such a survey as he makes of the different language of Europe. No ancient critic did make such a survey of dialects of Greek as he makes of the dialects of Italian. Furthermore, Dante gave a symbolic meaning to poetry. So actually the language, he divided the language into signum rationale, that is understanding, which have the semantic, sentence structure, and also signum sensual, that means phonetic, which is sound, the sounds which appeal to your taste. So as a critic, he had these two words you should remember, because the language which is used by Dante is very kind of a thing which is very effective in nature. So from this we understand that Dante was a great critic. He did not deviate from the other previous critics or previous writers, but still he was the first one to work on his own mother tongue, and he also worked on so many though he was very well educated, he did not want to write in other languages, so he chose his vernacular, that is Italian, as his medium of writing. So he gave a symbolic meaning to poetry also. So with this, we come to the end of this particular unit, in which you have three writers, that is the Roman classes. You find Horace, Longinus, and Dante. So this is the unit 2 we have come to an end. Thank you.